Welcome to the final day of our 71st annual NFRA Conference. It's been a great conference, and I appreciate everyone sticking in there with us. Who says an old dog can't learn a new trick? So I think this has really come across very well and been a big success. So let me start by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about me. Again, my name is Larry, and my family and I, we operate Yosemite Trails, which is a small resort permit on the Sierra National Forest. We're located just outside Yosemite National Park's south entrance, a little town called Fish Camp. So that's where we spend our summers. On the off season, we have a horse and cattle ranch in the central San Joaquin Valley near a town called Chowchilla. So that's where I'm speaking from this morning. We primarily offer horseback riding services, but like most businesses, we made some changes this last year due to COVID. For example, we opted not to do horseback overnight trips. So we stayed closer to home and just did day rides primarily. Our customers and staff wore face coverings, which sort of funny, my staff actually rather enjoyed that. They all wear wild rags, which if you're not familiar with the term, a wild rag is just an elaborate scarf or bandana. Anyway, gave them an excuse to walk around all day long looking like bank robbers. So they thought that was okay. We also sprayed off our saddles after each customer dismounted. We used a water-based quat and worked really well. But if you know about horses, they don't particularly like new things. So, a squirt bottle makes a little bit of a squirting sound when you use it, just a sound. Well, some of these horses, of course, had never heard anything like that. They're lucky to get a bath once a month, much less we squirt down every hour after trail ride. And so it took a little time talking these horses into having their saddle and the reins squirted off. But anyway, we got that worked out. It was a little Western for a while, but it lined out and worked fine. So we got through the summer fine, what there was of it. We had a late start and an early finish, COVID on one side and the creek fire on the other. But when we were rolling, it was going just fine. Anyway, let's get back to the program at hand. We have a great lineup for you today. Again, if you've been sticking out with us all 4 days, thank you. We really appreciate you tuning in and watching our presentations. We've had some fantastic speakers. I also would like to acknowledge the great job Warren Meyer and his staff have been doing behind the scenes, putting this, all the programming and getting the right presentations up. That stuff just doesn't happen by itself. So a shout out to Warren and his people.
Thank you.
Today we have Michelle Salas, and I believe a couple of her associates will be joining her as well. She'll be doing special use training on the Granger Thigh fee system and the graduated rate fee system. I, as a resort owner, am a little familiar with the graduated rate fee system, but it's one of those things where the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so I'm really personally looking forward to that presentation, and might even have to ask a few questions if there's some time at the end. Also, we have Lindsay Davis, who will be joining us, and she is with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, or commonly known as OR. She's and their organization have been great allies to NFRA, and particularly as of recent with Kevin Garden joining us on the board a few years ago. With his help and leadership, NFRA has really come to rely on OR and the relationship that we have with them. So thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today. And then lastly, we have Jason Brandt, who will be giving a presentation, Contracting 101, how businesses can become contractors with the National Forest. As businesses operating on the National Forest, this seems like a natural fit to me. And I don't know about you folks, but I'm certainly always looking for additional revenue sources. So I think this is a very timely presentation. We have a few more minutes. I have 8:56. And so I'd like to also, I hope she's there and queued up. I would like to give the heart and soul of the National Forest Recreation Association, Marilee Reese, an opportunity to just introduce herself. She works tirelessly to keep us in line and on track. And I think we all can agree that the National Forest Recreation Association wouldn't be the success it is without her tireless efforts. So Marilee, are you there, and are you able to speak for just a few minutes?
I am, Larry. Good morning to you, and good morning to everyone. And my job is so fun because of the board of directors that I work with. This year's conference committee, I mean, we laughed so many times because it was all new to us, and we were kind of, you know, and we're not 18-year-old computer experts. We're all, you know, gray-haired or no-haired, you know. So anyway, it's just fun. It's just fun working with the members of NFRA. That's what keeps me going, is all of our great members that are doing just amazing work with their clients. And I love the stories of multiple generations like Larry, Gray Eagle Lodge, Shuggy, and up in Elwell Lodge, and Brett Smith, and so many of our members are multiple generations, and I just love that. And even our campground people are bringing other family members on board. So anyway, it's a great job, and so I'm so glad that everyone was able to participate in the conference this year. And thank you all for, like Larry said, for hanging in there through Friday. We've got some great sessions. And one of the things that you know, we did GT and we did Gruffus a couple of years ago, but there's not enough time to do them because they're both fairly complicated and technical. So I'm so glad that John Hernandez made his staff available for the presentations today, and Michelle's back with us. So thank you very much. And then many of our members with the big fires that we had last year. And so, you know, fire camp rolls into town and just makes like a complete city. And there's so many contracting opportunities. I mean, if you have a pickup truck, you can be a driver. If you have a dozer, you can be, you know, cutting line. And if you have horses, you can pack in supplies. So there's actually, if you have a restaurant, you know, you can make lunches for fire crews. I mean, there's lots and lots of contracting opportunities with the fires. And if we're seeing that they're coming into town, and you might as well be a contractor because your neighbor might be. So that's why it's not an easy thing to get on that contractor list. And so we're so thankful for Jason being able to come today and share with us how to do that. So thank you all. We're going to be sending some follow-up links next week. You'll get recordings of the sessions. You'll probably get a survey. Anyway, so we will be doing some follow-up with you all next week. So thank you all for joining us.
Great, perfect. All right, well, let's get started. So Michelle currently serves as team leader for the Resource Audit Branch in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, based out of the Albuquerque Service Center. She was born in Los Angeles, raised in Albuquerque, so she's a local girl, and attended the College of Santa Fe, where she earned a Bachelor's of Business Administration with an accounting concentration. She is also a certified public accountant. So if you're ready, Michelle, would you take it away?
Okay, I'm ready. So do you want me to share the presentation from my side? I think I can do that here.
You can. I just got to find you on the participant list so I can make you a co-host. Okay. And so is it listed as Michelle on your little screen there?
Yes, Michelle Salas.
Michelle, boy, Oh, the solid, you're at the top. I'm sorry, because you've been speaking. You're now a co-host. And why don't you see if you can share it? I've got it just in case you can't. Look at that.
Okay, it looks good. There. So if I want the slideshow view, let's see. There we go. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. I just want to thank you for the invite to present again, once again this year. This is my second conference. I attended last year in Reno, and just want to say congrats to the 71st conference. That's pretty awesome. I had the opportunity to meet many of you in person, and I'm looking forward to the time again when we can do that. That was just a lot of fun. Interacting one-on-one at some of those after evening get-togethers. I've attended a few of the sessions this week, and they were very informative and a great example of everyone's collaboration, which will make our recreation offerings much easier, and then we can just focus on the fun. And that's what it's all about, right? Okay, so we'll get started here. So today's objectives, I'm just going to give you a little bit of overview of the resource audit branch. Of course, we're going to be talking about the GT campground program and details and definitions of the GT fee offset projects, which probably will be the focus of many of the questions, and also a little bit of coverage on the indirect cost rates. So this may be a refresher for some of you, but we'll have time at the end to answer some questions. So on the line today, I have our branch chief, John Hernandez. I also have our new team lead, Brian Nodell, and he replaces Yvonne Cox. You all may remember Yvonne from last year. She has retired, so Brian has joined the team. And then I have two of our auditors in charge who've been with the resource audit branch for many years, Alma Fennell and Gabe Urasto, and they will be helping with questions. So the resource audit branch was primarily set up to conduct fee reviews of our special use permits. We also do financial ability determinations, and we review negotiated indirect cost rate agreements. And we're also sometimes requested to do special requests for the Forest Service field offices and the Washington office and other agencies. So also listed on this slide are our standardized objectives that we typically review. One of the primary objectives is to determine if revenue that's subject to fees is accurate, whether the fees are computed correctly, and if related to GT fee offset projects, if the actual costs have been approved. On the Forest Service management side, we also need to determine if fees were billed and if they're paid. And typically our audit scope includes permit holders last 5 years. Sometimes that can be a little shorter and sometimes a little longer depending on past audits, special requests, that type of thing. So this slide just mainly shows what our governing bodies are and what we do. And the next slide is just a little bit more information about that. But the main point I wanted to make about these two slides was that our role primarily is oversight. So we don't set policy. However, I do want to say that we do collaborate with our forest management personnel and the Washington office to bring to light any issues that we're seeing, maybe trends that are happening, to open the discussion between permit holders and the Washington office to see if there's something that needs to be addressed in terms of policy clarification, training, or in some cases, sometimes policy can't be updated. So what are GT permits? Well, those are permits that give the permit holder the use of federally owned improvements and structures. Maintenance and reconditioning of the government-owned improvements may be required. And so as part of that, this can be credited to offset any fees that are due the government. Many of you probably know Section 7 of the GT Act, which authorizes this type of offset for fees due. And the other item that I wanted to stress on this slide is that the GT permit must clearly state that the fee being charged can be covered through maintenance and reconditioning performed by the permit holder. So documentation is key, and you'll hear that throughout the presentation. So as I mentioned, Granger type projects may reduce the amount of cash paid for fees actually due. And another key point in the criteria on this slide is that the value of the annual maintenance and reconditioning shall not be a fixed amount in the permit. So later on in the slide, we'll see that a GT agreement needs to be completed each year, and with the list of projects approved and listed there. So maintenance. This is just an informative slide about what the definition of maintenance is. Sometimes this is a little bit confusing, and permit holders, should work with their Forest Service permit administrator to determine whether the work they're proposing does fall into and is allowable under the maintenance definition. So reconditioning and renovation is a type of maintenance, but it's not construction or new facilities. It deals with existing fixed assets to restore the functionality or life of an asset, but not to improve. And so improvements are a little bit different, and those take a fixed asset to a better quality or add more or adding of a new asset. So this also can be an area where there's a lot of questions that come up. So again, work with your Forest Service permit administrator to help work out when you have questions specifically to those types of items. So on this slide, we're just giving you an example of what would not qualify for a GT offset. And what you can see is these are mainly just normal day-to-day items to keep the facility in good operating order. And again, these are just examples, so not a complete list. So there's a lot of information on this slide. So work in lieu of cash payments. So the cost of the work performed by the permit holder as agreed to in the offset fee agreement can be credited in lieu of cash payments against the annual permit fee. But the work has to be accomplished in accordance with that agreement and has to be approved by the Forest Service before the work is actually being done. The expenses do need to be documented, and so if you're selected for a review, those will come in at that point in time. But also they need to be available for the Forest Service. final payments. So annually, there should be a reconciliation between the permit fee payments and the credits given and the amount of the actual fees due. And if there's any difference, the Forest Service is responsible for issuing a bill for any of that difference. Now, on the other side, if there is the GT work is higher than the amount of the fees due, the expenses cannot be reimbursed. Because the Forest Service isn't appropriated funds for this type of work, the work can't, the additional work over the amount of fee cannot be reimbursed. So that's an important point to keep in mind. So this slide talks about the maintenance, reconditioning, renovation, and/or improvement, just a list of what would not qualify as GT offsets. And again, this is just a list of examples, not a complete list. So the GT offset agreement that I mentioned a few times. So here are the key points related to the offset agreement. So prior to issuing a permit and before each operating season, the Forest Service and the permit holder must annually enter into a written GT fee offset agreement that specifies the maintenance, renovation, reconditioning, and improvements to be used to offset the permit fee. The agreement will provide the portion of the permit fee to be offset by the cost of the work performed by the permit holder and the schedule for completion of the offset of the work. The agreement should list all the projects which are going to be used for that year and specify the standards for completion of the projects, and also list examples of allowable costs. For costs to be eligible for fee offset, they must be part of a qualifying project. So it's really important that you have that approval documented. The claim certification form, projects have to be accepted by the authorized officer. There needs to be supporting documentation, your payroll records, receipts, that type of information. And if you are including reimbursement for an indirect cost rate, it must be an approved rate by the Forest Service. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Oops, I lost my formatting here.
Second to the left from current slide. There you go.
This one?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not seeing the full screen, so it's kind of hard to tell where I'm at here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so these this slide is talking about the consolidated. Oops, sorry. Consolidated agreements. Slide 19. I'm not able to see the entire slide, so I'm. Okay, there we go. So we don't see a lot of this, but this is when the forest may perform some of the work for the permit holder. And again, there needs to be an agreement that this is going to be done. So we mentioned a little bit about the final fee reconciliation, and this does need to be done or completed 90 days after the close of the fiscal year. The forest will reconcile the final fees to the actual project costs. And when the fee offset is less than the annual fee, a bill will be issued for the balance. And when the GT fee offset work is greater than the annual fee, credit carryover isn't allowed. And in this situation, the concessionaire is deemed to have donated the work. So in the resource audit branch, we haven't reviewed, as a team, we couldn't remember the last time we reviewed a permit that included consolidated payments. But there is criteria that says a consolidated payment can be made for costs that cover more than 1 year. There is criteria on in terms of the fee period and fees, as you can see on the slide, greater than 250,000 and 6 to 10 year for fees less than 250,000. And this slide, just a little more information about how those fees are calculated and what happens at the end and how it should be defined in the permit. Okay, so slide. Okay, so as I mentioned before, indirect costs can be reimbursed for GT approved projects, but before including any direct costs, there has to be an approved rate. And to do that, the resource audit branch, a proposal is submitted to the resource audit branch. It's reviewed, approved. The permit holder will be given an agreement. Usually covers 1 to 2 seasons, and that agreement must be attached to any costs that are issued for reimbursement. And this slide covers a little bit of that. This slide talks about the criteria on the guidance for establishing indirect cost rates. So this is important for permit holders who want to know what their proposal should include. And this is also the criteria that we use in-house to verify that the proposal is in compliance and accurate. And again, it's really important that the rate is approved before requesting reimbursement for those fees. This is information regarding for new permits. Applicants have to disclose their accounting procedures and historic indirect cost allocation rates in response to a prospectus. And for existing, these permit holders must submit their indirect cost accounting rates to their authorized officer. So just a little more work up front for new permitting. So what are indirect costs? So indirect costs are primarily general and administrative expenses. And these are the types of expenses that may not be identifiable to a specific project. And some of the examples that we've shown below are like your executive departments, your accounting, HR, IT, sales and marketing. Those typically aren't support of one project, but multiple projects. So that gives you an idea of what an indirect cost would entail. This slide talks about examples of unallowable costs. So this is some of the items that the resource audit branch will review in the proposal to ensure that these types of costs aren't included. So just to talk about the process a little bit again, so high level, if you need an indirect cost rate, the proposal is sent to the resource audit branch. Our email address is below. We would review the proposal go back and forth as needed. And then once reviewed and approved, you would receive an agreement with an approval letter. And that letter would be used to, or part of your documentation for reimbursement. So compliance and documentation, I've mentioned that quite a few times. And one of the things that we look for when we're completing our reviews are to ensure that there are annual operating plans, of course, a GT fee offset agreement, documentation for your labor costs and other costs, the Forest Service approval for completed projects, annual reconciliations, liability and insurance coverage. Some of the common issues that we have found when we've completed reviews have been things such as not having a signed GT offset agreement, fees not calculated or reconciled, Forest Service hasn't approved some of the completed projects, and insufficient support for labor and other costs. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll leave this slide up here. This gives us contact information for our branch chief, myself, and our newest team lead, Bryant. So with that, I can open it up for questions.
This is Warren Meyer. I definitely can ask a couple. I don't want to jump ahead of everyone, but I will. I guess there's two things I think that cause the most confusion. We've got about 20, 30 special use permits around the country, and we're talking about Granger Thigh. And the first one is, I don't know what order to do these in. The end of the year balance thing gets us nervous a lot, because we have a lot of permit areas that say, no, we have a methodology. We're going to roll over the balance. Trust us. It's all good. And we do that because they're our authorized officer and are the experts of the Forest Service. But we worry that someday, there's going to be a problem with that, because that does two things. If they say roll over the balance and we not only would we lose the rollover the next year because we would overwork the next year, but then we'd also owe that balance again in the past year in an audit. So I worry about that. Is there a methodology that these guys potentially have? That's question one. And then related to that on audit, both for that issue and many others, we have almost all of our audits that say, hey, look, all your documentation is fine, the revenues are fine, but the audit results list 22 things the Forest Service didn't. And a lot of times the audit results come back and say, hey, these 7 projects the Forest Service should have never approved, so you concessionaire owe us money. And I'm sitting here saying, well, you just told me I should go to my authorized officer if we're unclear on it. And so we've done that. We've gone to the authorized officer. They said, oh, this is GT. We want you to work it. They signed the GT. We work it. I can't unspend the money. And then eventually it comes back that the audit branch thinks the Forest Service local officer shouldn't have called that GT and tries to make us liable for that mistake. So I guess those two things, mistakes by the Forest Service, and does the concessionaire end up having to pay for those? And then into your balances, is there some way for the Forest Service to preserve those, because they're claiming there is?
Okay, so I'm going to call out to Alma and or Gabe if you want to unmute and assist with the question. Thanks, Warren, for the question.
Okay. GTP offsets are used as payments when all lands, buildings, and improvements are owned by the government. Sorry. It may depend on the terms of the permit issued to the concessionaires, but my experience in auditing concessions that have GT permits is that, sorry, that annual fees are determined by using 2 separate calculations. This is also specified in the permit. The first is the graduated rate fee system. This is graphics that uses both adjusted gross revenue and gross fixed assets to determine fees. And Michelle will cover this later. The second is the facility fee, which is based on the appraised value of improvements. These two fees are added to arrive at the total annual fee. As Michelle mentioned, credit for GTP offset work is limited to the amount of the total annual fee. Current policy states that if the GTP offset is less than the annual fee, the forest will bill the concessionaire for the balance of the annual fee. If the GTP offset exceeds the fee amounts, the excess GTP offset cannot be carried to the next year. When the government pays for GTP offsets, these improvements cannot be listed in the concessionaire's gross fixed assets in calculating fees. These improvements do not qualify for GFA because they were paid for by the government using GTP offset payments, and therefore the improvements belong to the government. And also, one thing that I noticed too in the in accounting accounting of GT is that auditing concessionaires with GT permits is really a headache and time consuming. This is my experience. Some bills for fee payments were generated through SADS, which is, the graphics and the facility fee are recorded in SADS, and the bills for collection agreements and amendments were created by RACA, and sometimes they have suspense accounts. One bill per collection was created using FIMI. For GTP offset payments, it is possible that fee collection may be documented outside of SADS. The payment history could exist in Forest Service grants and agreements file. My advice to the Forest Service employee is to, as best as you can, try to keep all billing and payment records in one place. If you use SADS, keep everything in SADS. If you use FIMI, then keep everything in FIMI. This makes it easier for auditors to conduct an audit, and it makes it easier for the forest to track the records for billings and payments. And also, I want to talk about a facility fee. When I go in audit, I need to know if the facilities use fee that the government bills the concessionaire is a fair rental value fee. And normally, fees based on appraisal must be adjusted periodically to reflect the fair market value. The biggest problem with the facility fee is that the appraisal can be out of date. The last audit that I did, the appraisal was 15 years old. Real estate prices continue to increase, and permit holders are making improvements to government properties that affect the appraisal value. This causes the appraisal value to get out of date. If the appraisal is out of date and too low, then the forest is losing money. And that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Alma. Warren, so let me just circle back a little bit on the two questions. So you mentioned that one of the questions is, do the authorized officer have a methodology for carrying over? The presentation that we're giving today is a little more general, but the authorized officer, does manage to the permit. So if the permit has those types of abilities to accelerate fees from prior years or from future years to offset, the amount of work that was done in excess in the current year, those types of agreements can be approved by the authorized officer. But typically, if the permit doesn't mention it, the excess work is deemed to be donated.
Right. I guess both questions are the same core of it. Is in your presentation, you said, when in doubt, if you don't know if this is really GT, or if you don't know the rules, see your authorized officer. But my experience is that we're still liable. If the authorized officer gets it wrong, Albuquerque comes in and tells me that I owe money. If the authorized officer said, this is a GT project, and you come along and say, no, that's not a GT project, doesn't fit the definition. And so the $30,000 that the authorized officer agreed and approved for you to spend, you've got to pay back. You know, I find that we often get put in the position as concessionaires of being financially penalized for mistakes that the Forest Service is making in that context.
Agreed. And, you know, the GT offset agreement, typically what we find is that it isn't approved ahead of time. So I don't know if in some cases the work was done and the authorized officer thinks they just need to sign it because the work was done, and then we come
Well, these are, I mean, for years and years, I've had units like say, you know, you're gonna pay us $50,000 a year for our interpretive program out of GT. And it's in the GT plan and it's all signed, and I've questioned it, and I said, whatever, never mind. I'm just doing it because, you know, I work for you and you're going to evaluate my next bid. And if I raise a big stink about this not really being GT. But I mean, if we come back on audit, you're going to look at a bunch of bills for collection for interpretive purposes, and you're going to say that's not GT. And then you're going to tell me I have to pay it back despite the fact that it was in the GT plan and approved by the authorized officer. Anyway, I'm just telling you that, you know, we really get put the rock in the hard place, is that whenever it seems like the Forest Service never penalizes itself for having poor training on this issue, it always comes back to, well, yeah, you screwed up, you trusted us, you listened to your authorized officer, but now you owe us $50,000. You know, and we don't seem to have any way to appeal. You know, we just are stuck. We're dependent on, as you said in your presentation, we're dependent on the local officer, but I've often had the local officer overruled in an audit. So I guess there's not a question in there. It's just a frustration. So anyway, I'll turn it over to somebody else.
Well, you know, thanks for the comment though. And that is something that we can take a look at. And just so you know, our, you know, we've started a little more crossing lines of communication with the field. And so I think Georgia also may have mentioned this is an area that we'll be completing internal training on. So hopefully those types of situations become fewer and fewer, but it's noted.
Michelle, this is Marilee. One of the things that is really needed, and the permit administrators and line officers sort of need assurance that it's okay to do, is a 2-year Granger-Thai agreement. So say, for example, we would do 20, so it's here February. So you would do an agreement for 21, 22, because a lot of times what happens is there are emergencies during the season. And in that Granger-Thai agreement, it may have something like provide porta potties if the water system fails, and the water system belongs to the Forest Service, but you know, perhaps a well goes out or a pump goes out or something like that, and they have to use those GT funds to bring in porta potties until that can be fixed. And so that project bumps another project. And so then the other thing that has been a serious issue past 5 or 6 years is that we don't have the money to clear all the hazard trees. It's not just 1 or 2 trees per campground. It's like a whole forest health issue. So hazard tree reduction has been a big darn deal. And so sometimes if they have a 2-year agreement and they hire a logging contractor or whatnot to come in and, you know, and get it done. So they need a bigger chunk of money to get it done. And so they can use the 2-year agreement to help cover that. And then if, like I say, if there's a water system that goes out, or, you know, they have bodies or some other kind of emergency, the value of a 2-year agreement is huge. And I just, a lot of forests don't really know how to do that. And what I've said is just put, 2 years on the top of the agreement. I mean, I don't really know if that's right or not, but if the agreement just says 21 and 22, and then you reconcile it annually, but you've got to have that flexibility on there for emergencies.
Yes, thanks, Marilee. I know that emergencies are covered in the permits and the criteria. So just like you mentioned, they can be substituted, so they won't be on the original offset agreement. In terms of the 2-year agreement, I want to say if the permit does allow for that, the authorized officer can comply with that requirement. But let me open it up to Gabe or Alma if you have experience with that 2-year agreement cycle.
Michelle, this is Alma. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It happened to me, the forest, because it is included in the permit. That's the reason why the forest just approve it. Even though we don't allow it, we discourage it, but it is included in the permit. That's the reason why we just allow it. So sometimes the forest will they don't. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to say something negative. Well, maybe it too. The forest sometimes they will renew the permit without even asking guidance from the regional office or the Washington, and it happened to me. But then there is a multi-year agreement, and we just allow it because it's in the permit, even though the Forest Service doesn't want to do it, or they discourage it. But it's still, during the audit, we allowed it. It's not a write-up for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Gabe.
So another example on the emergency thing, say your GT bill is going to be $50,000, and in October you've done a flood or something that wipes out your water system, and now you need to spend $20,000 to over your. That's why the 2-year agreement is super important. And what I've seen in most of the permits, it's the standard clauses. It doesn't say that the clauses in the GT permits don't say do a 1-year permit or do a 2-year permit and whatnot. It doesn't get to that detail. It just says, reconcile annually, which they can do. But if that 2-year agreement is super helpful.
Okay, thanks, Marilee. So that's something else that I'll take down. I know that our team does have a briefing paper open that we're working with the Washington office on GT offset agreements covering multi-years, because that is something that we face quite a bit. And as you mentioned, the clauses are standardized. So it looks like it's unallowable. In the one instance where Alma completed a review, it became allowable because the permit had been amended to allow it. But typically the standard clause doesn't, right?
Well, the standard clause doesn't address it. The standard clause doesn't say, well, it says, I can't remember. I don't want to. Anyway, so yeah, if the Washington office is going to look at it, that would be really good.
Okay. It's noted.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
One question: what recourse does the permit holder have when we cannot get the Forest Service to give us a signed Granger-Thai agreement until November? This does not give sufficient time to complete any projects. This is frustrating, especially when we get a below standard rating on the year-end evaluation. So I hear this a lot, that the permittees submit the GT agreements signed until August, September, October.
Yeah, that one's a little more operational in nature. You know, it comes down to just the communication with the forest, possibly, you know, going to the next level of in the chain would be helpful, just to get some a quicker response. But other than that, I'm not sure. It's something we can address though in training.
I think that's the important. I remember talking to a forest supervisor one time, and he says, "Yeah, I've got this agreement on my desk, but I just don't have time to get to it." And it's like, well, then give it to somebody who does, because the months are clicking by, and the good time for a lot of work to happen is before the campgrounds open. So you're not, because at the end of the year, if you save all your GT projects for the end of the year and you get a snowstorm, you're done. So a lot of companies want to get going on those GT projects when they're opening the campgrounds and the public isn't there yet, and so they can get things painted and, you know, have a construction project, whatever, without displacing the public. So I think in the training, the importance of returning those, or, you know, sitting down, knocking those things out, you know, agreeable early in the year is to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. So any other questions?
Yes, Michelle. Hey, is it permissible to put a placeholder on the GT list that says we want to hold $10,000 for undetermined emergency repairs? But it's not a specified project. It's just that if we're going to save a little bit of money aside for something that we're not sure that's coming up.
Alma or Gabe, would you like to help with that question? Okay, so for that question, let me circle back with the team so we can look at the criteria and we can send a response back. Will that work?
Of course.
And I can't see who posed the question.
Oh, it's Steve Werner.
Steve
Oh,
Warner,
Steve. Thanks, Steve.
we all do that. So it'd be nice to know if we're following the rules when we do it. That's a very common practice.
Okay.
I have had Forest Service permit administrators be hesitant about that because they were saying that it was against the rules. So I just wanted to clarify whether it's okay or not.
Right. It's one of the things for us is one of the things that makes GT, there's two things that make GT complicated that work against each other. One is I don't think it's a very technical rules-based process that I don't think the local folks always have really good knowledge of it. So whenever you have a technical process and there's not good training, that's always potentially an issue. The other thing that comes up is forests really don't have a lot of pools of unallocated money for emergencies. And so a lot of times the temptation is to use the GT funds for that purpose, particularly when the Forest Service retains the obligation to do capital maintenance. Well, if there's a big problem that happens as capital maintenance, they don't have an extra pool of $50,000 ready to fix something. I mean, the GT is often, that's the same reason all that extra hazard trees get put on GT. I'm not even sure that's entirely valid, but it happens everywhere because these forests, the GT is often the only unallocated pool of money, and it's very tempting to use that, let's say, in a sort of broad sort of way.
Right. Yeah. I can see that.
But well, good. I mean, it would be, I would love someday if there could be a manual that we could refer to. I mean, it would be great that we have these discussions with the local staff all the time, and unfortunately, nothing's really in writing very well. It'd be great if I could sort of say like the old desk guide and go back to the desk guide and say, hey, this is, the way to, here's right out of the desk guide, quote, yada, 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 and that's how to do it. Because it really is a very technical problem that
Mhm.
both we and the Forest Service locally aren't trained on. I mean, we as concessionaires have a lot of practical experience in it, but it is just crying for some kind of written guide someday. This is how you can write a multi-year collection agreement. This is how you can check on, an expense if you're unsure. Those kinds of things are, it's a constant issue.
Yeah.
It's probably the largest source of contention back and forth, not contention, but back and forth and uncertainty often between we concessionaires and the Forest Service is GT offset, the process, all that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And we see that as well when we do our reviews. And, typically we don't do quite as many of these types of reviews. So, it's hard for us to say what trends we're seeing as much. So this is good information to take back for sure. So I appreciate that. Any other questions, or are we at our time?
So Michelle, this is John Hernandez. Can I just make a few comments?
Yes, thanks, John.
Sure. So first of all, greetings to everyone, and thanks again for this invite. We certainly do appreciate it. I was on a couple of things. Was listening to some conversations probably day before yesterday, and I think Warren, you had mentioned something about this wanting to have more communication with certainly our Forest Service partners in this type of modality. So, talking to the Ben Johnsons, the Georgia Bassos, and of course, anywhere, like I told you last year, the Resource Audit Branch to be available to help, not hinder. A couple of things I'd like to mention. First of all is, as you know, we've, Yvonne Cox retired, and we also, I don't know how many of you met Mike Miller. Mike Miller retired a couple years ago. Well, when they decided to retire, good for them. We lost some corporate knowledge. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to rebuild that corporate knowledge. So, like I'm sure Mike and Yvonne could give you a lot of your answers to your questions off the top of their head. They just had that uncanny ability to do that. We're still trying to develop that corporate knowledge. So I'm asking for some grace so that we can get back to you. Do our research, increase our corporate knowledge, so that we can at least provide you with some type of answer. I think somebody had said earlier in a comment, and I just want to address that real quick. I think Judith, to your point, you had said, does the Washington office have a GT policy person? Seems like the questions don't seem like the auditor's ballpark. Really, I think you really hit that on the head. We're really, some of the questions they're asking aren't really in our wheelhouse per se. But what we are trying to do as the Resource Audit Branch is we're trying to be that liaison, that conduit for you and our Washington office partners. So what we're doing is we're putting a lot of briefing papers together when we come up with issues. This GT and Gruffus issues are certainly one that we putting briefing papers to do. The idea is that I then escalate it to my director, Erica Benegas, who unfortunately was not able to make this call today. And then of course to our CFO, Tony Dixon, then in Washington. So then we are in constant contact, at least monthly, with Georgia Basso and Ben Johnson and Sean Wetterberg and those folks, so that we can let them know what we're seeing out in the field. They can let us know the current policy or anything that's affecting us via Washington, so that we as the Resource Audit Branch can try to affect policy, so that we can audit correctly and audit to policy just like an auditor would do. So I'm actually wanting to provide that same service as it is to you all, because it's certainly benefits us as auditors to know what the industry is seeing as well. So to be able to approach it, that have that two-pronged approach, to be able to see what Washington is looking at, what they're thinking, what their thought process is, and to see what you're seeing out there in the fields. And so we, of course, anytime you have any types of meetings or anything, and you think we could benefit you all, we certainly would appreciate being included. Warren, Marilee, of course, I extend that that offer to you all to see how we can help, knowing that we are trying to build our corporate knowledge as well. That's why I have two of my senior auditors on this line. I'm here, and of course, Michelle Solis and my other teammate, Brian. So we're all really trying to help out. I wish we had the questions or your answers to your questions off the top of our, the tip of our tongue, as it were, like Mike or Yvonne would, but give us some time and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, make that offer to everyone. We're certainly available to you.
Could I
avail ourselves to you?
Could I make one suggestion?
Sure.
Because for those of us in the GT world, and we need to get to Gruffus because that's another set of fraught subjects for our members. But,
Sure.
but just to polish out the GT, because I do think these things are not just audit, because y'all come in after the fact, and it's hard for y'all to fix something that happened 5 years ago. So it's a process thing. But we do have a lot of technical questions. This is like more questions on this section than we've gotten like on all the other ones combined. And the same thing happened last year. I'm thinking that instead of putting you all on the spot, that we could put together a set of issues and questions and maybe get y'all and the folks in Georgia and her folks together on a call, like as a follow-up, like in, I don't know, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but a month or two, and just sort of have a GT discussion where we have both the recreation operation side of the table and y'all at the table, and we kind of walk through the issues we're seeing as sort of as mutual education, and also to maybe see if we could work some of these issues or what we could be doing about it. And that might be, I think that would be a really good step, because those kinds of communications with other groups like the reservation service has really improved things a lot for this group. And I think GT offset for the campground world is probably the most fraught subject that's still out there, that is still got everybody nervous, and having some kind of communication process at least one time where we can work through issues would be a help.
So Warren, I absolutely agree. I think this is the second year that we've been invited here, and we run out of time because it's just such a very important and in some cases a complex issue. Right. I think we're all trying to wrap our arms around it. In fact, just this probably about a couple hours ago, I fielded a call from one of our Forest Service partners, just kind of shrugging and throwing his hands up and calling us saying, what is this GT? What is this? It was actually Gruffus. It was a Gruffus. So we even have folks out in our folks out in our Forest Service partners, or internal Forest Service partners, who are struggling with this issue as well. Certainly take that idea. I can certainly do what I can to take that idea up to Ben and Georgia and our folks when we meet with them next. Put that on the agenda. I also like your idea about a desk guide. We were certainly we provide our own desk guides for our own audits, our own audit program of work. So that's something we could also look at that might be helpful. With the idea of the audience not just being auditors, right? So it's not auditees and accountainees, but the idea that more operational. So as the gentleman I talked to earlier said, for us laymen who don't, who aren't getting it, certainly make it so that it's user friendly. So those are certainly ideas that we can address. I think some type of forum would be good to get with everyone, we can all bring our heads together. And again, where auditors can help, we certainly would avail ourselves to you all.
Because I told Georgia and her staff the other day, it's not just about rules compliance, but there's a strategic issue, is that, when we wait till November to sign plans and we don't get the GT work, this is an enormous resource when you add it up across all the permits that we should be using strategically, especially given the Forest Service has such a large maintenance backlog, that we should be using this and visitors want us to be using this intelligently. So it's not just about the technical issues, it's also about, facilitating the operations, folks out there in the Forest Service to understand it well enough and understand what they have in their hand that they can use to solve some problems.
Agreed. And I would suggest that based on the conversation I had this morning, there, our Forest Service folks are looking to the same thing.
Right.
Because
So, okay.
they don't know what they don't know, right? And so what
Marilee
we'd
and
like
I
to
will
do,
try to follow up with you in Georgia, and we'll try to see if we can come up with a process that's not onerous, but maybe put questions together in advance and have a discussion session around them.
sure, we surely welcome that. And I think it'd probably make more time than we've certainly have today. But
Right.
just to leave you and let you know that we're here for you as much as we can be. We'll be here to help you.
Thank you very
everybody.
much. Thank you very much,
John.
John and Michelle. And we probably, I mean, we obviously have a lot to talk about that, but we probably need to move on to the Gruffus session because that's another, thing that could take weeks to go through. So you're on again, Michelle.
Okay, well, discussion to be continued, so that's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now I need to find my next presentation here. Okay, I'm having trouble because I cannot see the whole screen.
Michelle, you might need to stop sharing and then.
And then reshare?
Yeah.
Okay. Up at the top, it's blocked and I can't see my other options here. Let's see.
I think Warren has the presentation if you want him to run it.
It's okay. Can you all see that fine?
Michelle, at the bottom right, there's a little tiny, looks like a slide screen.
Oh, I see.
No, over to the right, more, one more, no.
There we
Yeah,
There we go. Okay. Alrighty. So again, good morning, everyone. We'll just jump right back in. A lot of you were probably in the previous session, so we'll just get started here. So the objectives today, we're going to look at the Gruffus definition, some sales definitions and common findings that we've seen, GFA, gross fixed assets definitions and tracking, and a little bit about defining the development boundary. So if you were in the last session, the RAB's role in audit objectives, these are our standardized audit objectives. In terms of the Gruffus permits, of course, we just are mainly want to determine that they're accurate, complete, and billed and paid, and there is documentation to support. So the simple definition of Gruffus, it's a percentage of revenue fee system using sales, gross fixed assets, and development boundary. That's all used in a calculation that's very complex to come up with what the actual fees are due. Gruffus permits typically are issued to resorts and marinas and limited to 80 acres. So Gruffus, as I mentioned, is a complicated calculation, but it's dependent on the relationship between the sales and gross fixed assets. So as a permit holder, it's really important that the gross fixed assets are complete and also that all sales are recorded accurately. So the sales definition are the gross receipts or revenue received from the operation, including sublessees. That's sometimes the question that comes up quite a bit, plus the value of gratuities, less commissions, franchise receipts. There are some gratuities that are excluded and sometimes other receipts may be includable. Included in sales are all revenue derived from goods and services sold, which are related to the operations under the permit, the value of goods and services traded for goods and services received, and the value of gratuities not excluded through the policy statement that should be approved by the forest supervisor. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So the items that are excluded from sales, here's a list, refunds from returned merchandise, receipts from sales of real and non-rental personal property used in the operation, rents paid to the permittee by the sublessee. And we'll talk a little bit about that more. And then sales taxes paid or payable to taxing authorities, and items listed in a policy statement prepared by the permittee with the written forest supervisor's approval. So sales categories, here's a list of those. And the reason why these are important and to pay attention to is that they are a component of the GFA as mentioned above. Gratuities. So in terms of the gratuities, one of the main points we wanted to make about this is that it's really important if you have a gratuity policy that's been reviewed with the forest, that does help with questions, down the road, and to ensure that gratuities are includable and excludable are accounted for accurately. So here's just a list of some non-reportable and reportable type gratuities, and these are things that could be addressed in a gratuity policy. So some of the common findings we have in sales are sales being reported in the wrong category. And again, this is important because the sales categories each have a different percentage in terms of the calculation. So, not having it in the right category can result in fees being calculated too low or actually fees being calculated too high. So it's really important to pay attention to those. We have also seen where the incorrect reporting of fishing licenses, that must be a common one, and not reporting sublessee sales. So what's kind of confusing about sublessees is that a lot of times we'll see where the rent is reported, but it's actually the gross revenue should be reported, and then the rents shouldn't be reported. So the gross fixed assets definition. So this is the total of the original undepreciated costs. I know that sounds like a lot of accounting language, but it's really your total cost of an investment in improvements and fixtures, plus the cost of equipment necessary to generate the sales and other income. So if you ever are in doubt, one of the things you can do is apply these 4 tests to ensure that that assets should be included. So one of the first things is they must be used and necessary to generate the sales or revenue indicated in the permit. They must have been or are currently being capitalized in the holder's accounting records. They must be located in the development area, and they must be tangible. So intangible assets aren't includable. So Form 2700-8 reconciles the depreciation schedule to the assets reported as GFA. So many of you are probably familiar with this. It's a way for your asset list to be maintained, where you can make additions and subtract things that should not be included, or also adjust values as needed. Some of the common issues that we've seen in our reviews are assets not recorded in an identifiable way, meaning it's just like a base, like it could be just like miscellaneous. Well, if we can't determine what the asset is and how it is used to generate the revenue, it typically would be disallowed. The assets not being in the development area, assets that may be on your accounting records, but they aren't used to generate the revenue per the permit. Assets that aren't capitalized, so typically those may just be expenses. And the timing of purchase and disposition of assets. So typically what that means is that we're seeing asset lists that aren't being maintained to include the actual current assets being used. The development boundary area, we have a few questions about this, but typically not too many. So the issues that we have seen around this is that primarily there isn't a development boundary found in the permit. If the business has expanded and it wasn't updated, and incorrect free proration of what's in and what's out of the boundary. So compliance and documentation, this is really important, especially you heard it quite a bit in the last presentation and in this one. So as we mentioned before, typically our audits are for past years. So it's hard to remember, what may have occurred years past. So it's really important if you keep your documentation about your annual operating plan, worksheet showing how your sales actually tie to the trial balance. That's usually really important when working with the auditor from the resource audit branch. Also, reconciliation between your fixed asset lists and your tax returns or balance sheets. Sometimes there's differences there that need to be explained. Of course, your balance sheets and income statements and any interim reports that are due and issued 30 days after each month. So again, here's our contact information, and we can open it up for questions at this time. Any questions related to Gruffuss?
Hold on, I'm reading down through the chat to see if I can see anything.
Michelle, some of the questions that the break-even point on the categories, can you, sometimes people don't, it changes the fee because of the break-even calculation on the different categories. And so what we found in the past is some people don't have things in the right category. And so it's either going to make their fee higher or their fee lower.
That's exactly right.
Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so let me open that up to Gabe and Alma since they're in the field more and see that a little bit more. Gabe, Alma?
Okay, this is Alma. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, break-even point. This is the point in a business where sales cover costs and the business begins to show a profit. It is expressed as a ratio of sales to gross assets. Auditors don't calculate the break-even point. We just rely on the FORIAS has a self-calculating form, which is FS 2719, that if you fill in the blanks, the break-even point is automatically calculated. Other than that, we don't do anything about the break-even points.
So Marilee, is your question more about sometimes difficulty in determining which category it goes into? Yeah, and that's what we see. Overall, we see that everyone's trying to do the right thing. It's just sometimes the criteria is not clear enough. And unfortunately, years go by and then we come in and say, oh, that was in the wrong category. And like you said, it does have an impact, higher or lower on the fee. So it sounds like that's another area that we can include in, training internal folks on when you all have those questions to them, if they have a way to help verify that it is in the right category so that you don't keep reporting it in the wrong category, and it'll have an impact years down the road.
Exactly. And I think if we proceed with these, some kind of a monthly, call into the auditors, ask any question you want, kind of call the resorts for, 20, 30, 40 years. They've they've kind of got it figured out by now, but for some cells, and there's I can just see their eyes, just just rolling to the back of their head. They don't know what I'm talking about, and I barely know what I'm talking about. So it's like I can't. I'm not the financial person to answer this, but I just know that the getting things recorded in the correct sales categories is really important.
It is. And, in the field, there are sometimes a lot of new folks. And so that's why it may not be clear to them as well when you ask them a question, because they're still, maybe getting up to speed.
Yes.
On those areas. So, yeah.
May I pose a quick question?
Sure, Larry.
So you
Right.
mentioned in your presentation, and this is something that I've run into just a little bit. When you look at a list of gross fixed assets, you made the comment that one of your criteria is how often that list is either items are added or, more importantly, probably taken off of the list. Is there a rule of thumb? What's a red flag for you? If the list hasn't been changed in X amount of years, can you just give me some insight, peek behind the curtain there?
Yeah, typically we do like to see that reviewed annually. So, and if there are any changes, even just to note, if you print out your list and, state no changes this year, that way we know at least it was looked at. But if we have a list from 5 years ago and we compare it to today's list and it hasn't changed, that may not be realistic, and then that opens the door for more questions. So, I guess it could happen where you don't have changes, but even if you just make that note.
That's a great suggestion, because I just worked on ours and we didn't make any changes this year because it wasn't the kind of year that we were going to be spending many money. So we've used all the assets we had because we had to. So that's a great point. I'm going to go back and put a note on there.
There you go. Because then when, if anyone comes in and says, why wasn't this updated, or it doesn't look like it's been updated, you can say, oh, it was. Look, we reviewed it and it's signed off here and there were no changes. Otherwise, you're guessing, oh, I don't know why nothing was updated, or,
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, a question from the gallery. How can permit administrators help permit holders calculate that GFA?
Alma, Gabe, do you have any insight of if they use SUDS or if they have the schedule?
Let's see how to help. Okay. Let's see. When we record the gross fixed assets, it is based on the original undepreciated costs, and the permit holders sometimes they make mistakes. They deduct the depreciation expense, and they're not supposed to. Depreciation of assets, it will not affect the fee calculation. If you when it comes to depreciation of assets, because we record the total assets based on undepreciated costs. And when it comes to helping the permit holders, you just need, I guess, you just need to tell them what are the purchases today, what are the additions, and what are the deletions. I guess those are the only thing that you can tell them. And also the intangible assets, they're not supposed to be included in the calculation of GFA. So I think those are the only things that I can tell or I can say. So
Thank you, Alma.
So Michelle,
welcome.
maybe like you guys, I know, I don't want to add more work to you, but maybe you could like issue a tip sheet. In other words, a tip sheet on calculating your GFA, or a tip sheet on updating, or a tip sheet on something or other, because that might help the permit administrators and the permittees at the same time. Because everything she just talked about was good information, but in 10 minutes, it's going to be hard to remember
Right.
that.
Yeah. So I took the suggestion down.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions from the world of resort and permit administrators out there?
You know what, I'll ask a question if I may. This is Jen. So I think one of the things that's confusing, I don't know, can you guys hear me? I see
Yeah.
Marilee there. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
One of the things that's confusing, years ago, we just had a simple GFA sheet. And now we get at the end of the year, when we do final tally sheets and whatnot, we get the reconciliation sheet, reconciliation of GFA to booked amounts. And I think when I talk to other resort owners, one of the confusing things is, there's the GFA list, and then the, assignment to the depreciation schedule. But then what gets confusing is the booked cost and then adjustments. So I think that's where it sometimes gets confusing on that. Well, at least in my experience, the newer sheet that we have, it's probably 10 years old now. And in part because in a lot of cases, our permit administrator is not the one doing this. It's someone else on another zone, an accountant on another zone. It doesn't really go through our permit administrator. I don't know if that's normal, but that's kind of how it works on our forest anyway. But that booked cost, the adjustments there, that tends to be the confusing part, I think.
So is the confusion of what the adjustment should be?
Exactly. Yeah. Does that come off your, yeah, I don't know where you get your cost basis sometimes on some of these particular assets. I guess that's the confusing part.
So the cost basis, I know what form you're talking about. I don't have the number right in front. I can't think of it at the top of my head, but so the cost basis is what you paid for the complete cost for the asset, including the cost to put it into service. So if there are any like little adjustments that need to be made and you hire someone to come, work on it to get it up and running. So it's all costs to put an asset into operation.
Okay, and then the adjustment part?
And then on the adjustments, if you look at the form down below, there's like, I don't know if it's ABC or 1, 2, 3, and it has definitions of what the adjustment should be. And I don't have the form in front of me, sorry, so I can't recall specifically what those all are, but those are the adjustments that belong in that column.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the adjustment codes are intangible asset, uncapitalized cost to provide utility service, expensed assets allowed by an old permit, value of leased assets not capitalized. That's the ones you're, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Any other questions?
Let's see, I didn't catch it. I think the question just came in on chat. Marilee, do you have that?
Yeah, Kevin's got a question.
Sure, maybe I can read it. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Michelle. Yeah, the question I've got is with regard to when there's a review done and it's determined that the, for example, fee categories are not accurate, the wrong fee category was used. Is the permittee, if the new calculation determines that the fee should have been higher in prior years, is the permittee liable for the higher fees? And if so, how far back in time are they liable?
So typically, yes, the permit holder would be responsible for the difference in the fees. And typically our audits do cover a 5-year period. Sometimes it can be a little bit shorter, maybe 3 or 4 years, depending on like when the last audit was, or if it's a special request, that type of thing.
Right, thank you very much.
So that's why upfront, as Marilee and others have mentioned, if you have the questions, if we can get some tips out there, some training materials so that it's done right up front, and then you don't have to worry about it later.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you to Michelle and John and your team of folks to be with us today. We really appreciate it. And as you can see, there's lots of, this is really a very technical aspect of special uses permit administration. And so knowing where people can go to get help is one step, in order to, developing some chat sessions with you later on. And again, really appreciate you guys taking part, being part of our conference team. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thanks again for the invite. Everyone have a good afternoon and weekend.
Okay, thanks.
Here, everyone, be safe.
Very much.
So we have a few minutes. I'm not sure if Jessica's with us yet. We have about 8 minutes before the next session. So if everybody wants to take a little break and come back at 10:30, we'll get going with. Not Jessica, Lindsay Davis. Lindsay, are you there yet? No, I don't think so. So go ahead, take a little break, and we'll be back at like 10:25. So just a few minutes.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I believe Lindsay Davis is in the queue. Are you there, Lindsay?
I see
Lindsay,
her.
can you hear me?
I see her join. She's muted. Lindsay, you need to unmute yourself. Lindsay Davis. I'll ask her to unmute.
We're a couple minutes early, so she might still be getting herself ready.
I'll just take this while she's before she joins us. I just want to let everybody know I've gotten lots of questions about the recordings of the sessions that Warren has faithfully been doing.
Oh, I
And so
have another
we
one
will-
to post. I'll do it right
we
now.
will get those posted. We will get those. He's got them all. We'll be getting the links out to you next week. So so stay tuned. We're going to take a breather over the weekend, and then we will get organized. And take it away, Larry. Lindsay, if you want to unmute. There you go.
Hi, everybody.
Hello,
Hey,
good morning.
How's the day going?
Wonderful,
Glad I couldn't
wonderful.
jump in sooner. Sorry.
No, we're rushing you a little bit. We're a couple minutes early, so
Okay, great.
are you ready? We can give you a couple more minutes, otherwise we might turn you loose.
Ready to
Okay.
rock.
All right, fantastic. And do I understand that you're a new mom as well?
No, Jessica
Oh,
Turner
okay.
is our normal executive director. I'm filling in for her while she's on maternity leave.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That got my lines crossed. Thank you. Well, let me do a quick introduction, Lindsay, and then I'm going to step out of the way here. So Lindsay is the Vice President of the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, the nation's leading coalition of outdoor recreation trade associations and businesses. He serves on the board of directors for the Outdoor Alliance, is a founding board member of the Utah Wildlife Federation, and a member of the Utah Office of Outdoor Recreation's Advisory Committee. And as I mentioned earlier, Lindsay, you weren't with us early this morning, but I was just complimenting you and your organization for the support. We've become great partners moving forward with the help of Kevin Garden. We really value the relationship and the partnership. It's really grown and strengthened over the last couple of years, and so we are grateful to you and Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. So take it away.
Awesome. And is this presenter view looking right on the screen here?
Yeah, I can see your slides.
Cool. Okay, just checking. You never know what's happening in Zoom land. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And just echoing the sentiments about partnership. I joined.
Well,
the
one
outdoor
second,
recreation-
we're actually seeing your notes view. Maybe you need to see that, but we're seeing the slide. We're not just seeing the sort of presenter view, we're seeing the notes view. And it's fine. We can see the slide. It's just small because it's got
How's
lots
that?
of. That's better.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
No,
that's
thank you.
fine. That's what I wanted to know. Well, I joined the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable in mid-April of last year. So it's been a really exciting and big time to be joining the recreation community and this coalition. And as you all well know, we're the nation's leading coalition of trade associations. We have 33 national members that represent the full spectrum of recreation activities, everything from skiing, hunting, off-roading, boating, RVing, diving, horseback riding, and more. So our work is to unify outdoor businesses around the shared goal of maximizing opportunities for recreation by improving infrastructure and access, and ensuring the recognition of the recreation economy and its contributions on both the national and state levels. So we were recently formed to be this sort of big unified voice and be a singular advocate for the recreation sector. And this is just a slide of our members. As you can see, tons of folks involved. Really thrilled to have everybody as a part of this really strong coalition. So a huge component of our work is to work with the Bureau of Economic Analysis to ensure the recognition of the recreation economy. So last fall, we received our 2019 numbers, which now puts us at 788 billion and our contribution to GDP totaling 2.1%. That's more than utilities, mining, agriculture, and educational services. One new stat that we got out of last year is that we now represent 3.3% of all US employees. So that's 3.3% of everybody working in the recreation economy, which is just awesome. More than real estate, rental and leasing, legal services, and roughly equal to hospitals. So this shows our industry supports 5.2 million jobs across the country, many of which are in rural communities. And these numbers really are the backbone of ensuring our seat at the table. And we work every year to ensure that the BEA continues to have funding to kind of grow their capacity to measure the recreation economy and improve upon the statistics that we're getting. And I think, you know, from an advocacy standpoint, when you look at the jobs and the economy side of this, it proves our industry isn't just a nice to have benefit, but a key economic driver across the nation, which props up state and rural economies, especially during the challenges that we've seen during the pandemic, as we've seen recreation boom. And so if you haven't yet kind of gone down the rabbit hole of these BEA numbers, there's some really great new state resources that they've released in the fall of last year that allow you to look at how this revenue generation looks state by state and activity by activity, which is super cool. So this just makes us able to be a super strong business voice capable of solving challenges on public lands in unique ways. Okay, so as everybody knows, one of my first jobs with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable at the peak of COVID was to come on and be able to help measure the impacts of COVID on the recreation economy. And hopefully you guys have had a chance to sort of use some of this research and data. But of course, we were seeing airlines get bailouts and other industries be able to quantify and speak about the impacts of COVID on their sector. And the recreation economy had yet to really quantify what that looked like and be able to, you know, immediately advocate for our needs. And we saw just huge immediate hardship on the recreation sector. We were ranked the second most affected sector behind food and accommodation, and also at the same time just saw immediate demand and saw our economy and businesses really step up to meet the needs and challenges of a year of COVID, shifting to PPE, using RVs as mobile testing sites. So it's been a big year for us, and we worked with the Oregon State Recreation Economy Initiative to do a big impact study, which was really interesting. It was the first time that we were able to quantify, like I was saying, the economic impacts at a time of hardship. So as of June, we were out of all 21 trade associations that responded on behalf of their businesses, which ended up totaling over 23,000 companies and nearly 2 million employees. Everybody, 100% of the respondents were experiencing difficulty with production and distribution, 79% experiencing extreme impacts. 88% of the businesses had laid off or furloughed a portion of their workforce. 94% of the industry was experiencing a decrease in sales, with about a quarter of it seeing above a 50% decrease. And 95% of the industry was seeing a decrease in revenue, with 26% seeing a decrease of 50% or greater. So it was just staggering to see the hit that we took. And this really spearheaded our ability to get fixes made to the CARES Act. One of the biggest issues that happened right away that I'm sure many of you experienced was the loan calculations not being applicable to seasonal businesses. So that was a huge change that we were able to get made that supported all of the workers and businesses trying to stay afloat during this time. We also led calls with the land management agencies and industry leadership on effective and safe ways to keep outdoor recreation assets open on public lands, and also helped them kind of measure how those impacts and surges in recreation were going to be on gateway communities with safety for COVID. So just tons of really great interagency coordination with the public and private sector. We also worked with all the governors around the importance of recreation and as a healthy and safe method of being able to exercise and get stress relief during the lockdowns. We drafted over 50 letters to all the governors explaining why companies should be deemed essential businesses and kept open, like bike shops and other repair shops. And we convened discussions with the National Governors Association and the Outdoor Recreation Learning Network regarding the importance of recreation and how to safely reopen sites once that started to happen. And all this research is available on our website if you need to click in, and you can go industry by industry, which is interesting as well if you want to go down the data rabbit hole. So amazing to see kind of start off the year with just a huge hit to our economy, and then also at the same time have recreation's demand just going through the roof. So, and if any of you tried to buy a bike or fishing gear, a boat or an RV, you know this, and of course you've seen the impacts on public lands, but participation is really soaring. And in past years, less than 50% of Americans enjoyed an outdoor experience. And we saw 81% of Americans doing that in 2020, with almost 33% doing so for the first time and planning to keep the habit post-pandemic. Camping viewed as the safest way to travel. The Forest Service reporting record growth, as you all know, on days when they would be expecting kind of normal traffic or high traffic, visitation was nearly 3 times. I mean, everybody we talked to said every weekend feels like a holiday weekend, just crazy amounts of visitors. We saw park visitation increases up to 145%. And then just recently, there's been some great reports released over the last 5 weeks or so that kind of quantify big numbers for 2020. Camping participation grew 28% with 7.9 million new campers. 8.1 million more Americans hiked in 2020. Total outdoor participation grew to 52.9%. We've seen some big demographic shifts as well. 15% of new anglers are Hispanic and 16% of new boaters are Hispanic. 57% of reactivated anglers are women, and 70% of reactivated boaters are women. And nearly 10 million new people enjoyed fishing in 2020. So nationwide, the fishing license sales increased 10%, which obviously has a big impact on public lands funding models. Bikes and bike products increased 81% in May year over year, and off-highway motorcycle sales are up 50% for the first half of 2020 compared to that of 2019. So in addition to the big participation surges that we saw in 2020, we also saw just landmark legislation happen on behalf of the recreation community. So impactful that we were getting reports like, how are you doing this? Nothing else is getting through, but recreation bills are getting through. Like, what are you doing? So it was pretty cool to see just the strength of and the importance and the recognition of our industry happen alongside big legislation like the Great American Outdoors Act. So as all of you know, this was signed into law, which not only provided nearly $10 billion over the next 5 years for the maintenance backlog on public lands, but also permanently funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million a year. So kind of big efforts on the ORR side is that we worked really hard to include U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the BLM, and the Forest Service in that Great American Outdoors Act funding. We were able to get letters of over 130 cross-sector CEOs to advocate for the passing of Great American Outdoors Act that were read on the floor, which was super exciting. And now the work has really shifted into implementation of those dollars and how we get the greatest ROI for recreation out of that funding. So we're working with the Forest Service and DOI leadership to make sure that that funding really addresses the maintenance backlog on public lands, and that we can have public-private partnerships coordinated so that the RV industry knows which campgrounds are going to get improvements and can coordinate their efforts as well. Okay, so alongside the passing of the Great American Outdoors Act, of course, we saw the Land and Water Conservation receive its full funding in perpetuity at $900 million a year. This is huge. I mean, this money is generated from offshore oil and gas drilling, and has kind of two main programs, the federal and the state side. And it really is the backbone of ORR's conversation around equitable access in the outdoors, because this funding allows states to develop recreation assets all over the place. In addition to sort of being able to buy private land, it can go to parks and green space, improving pools, a lot of those kind of close to home recreation assets that we really saw a demand for this year. It was especially important as governors restricted travel, and nearly 100 million Americans were not within 10 minutes walking distance of a park or green space. So we're really excited about what LWCF means for opening recreation to different communities across the country. And interestingly, this fund has been around since 1965, and the full 900 million had only been fully allocated twice in the history of the fund. So this past year's authorization mandates that will be the case moving forward. So on the state side, and this gets complicated, so don't drill me too hard in questions about LWCF, but on the state side, this map here, all of the yellow dots that you see are stateside projects that ORR surveyed through our membership to collect, and they show kind of where the recreation demand is across the country, which is really awesome. And this was the first time, I think the conservation community has been doing this for longer, but this was the first time that the recreation community really had a strong voice and a lot of data into how these funds could be used to improve access across the country. And this funding is tied, at least on the state side, to each state's SCORP plan or their statewide outdoor recreation plan. And basically they are awarded grants through a competitive process and open selection. And under law, the states have to have a 50% match to the total cost of the project budget. So I know right now, at least in our state working group and in our conversations with the Outdoor Recreation Learning Network, this is probably the most complicated part for states, and everybody's trying to figure out how to access this funding. And there was a reversal of the secretarial order last week that sort of helped get this moving, but I think we're going to see a lot of coordination and effort on ensuring that states have really clear access to this money and can use it for recreation development. So we developed a white paper detailing how the program could be used for rural economic development and to get more yellow dots on this map in places where you're kind of not used to seeing recreation hotspots. Like I said, the survey, this map was developed in partnership with the Trust for Public Land and is something that we imagine continuing to do, hopefully every year, to continue to build on just the data collection and improve the information that's out there on the stateside funding. So of all those yellow dots, of which there are about 200, we consolidated that research into ORR's top 11 projects, which sort of have the highest recreation ROI based on kind of the diversity of recreation activities that they would support. Okay, a couple more legislation wins for 2020. So we also saw the passing of the Simplifying Outdoor Access for Recreation Act and the Recreation Not Red Tape Act through the House Natural Resources Committee, which are two bills that folks have been working on for a really long time. On the source side, it modernizes the permitting process for individuals and groups to engage in rec activities on federal lands and waters, and Recreation Not Red Tape, which removes barriers to outdoor recreation by expediting permits for guides, gets more veterans outdoors, seniors, and kids. It holds agencies accountable to make recreation a priority. And these are two bills that we're expecting to see some development on over the next couple of months. Additionally, we held meetings with 8 cabinet secretaries and agency leaders to convey the importance of the recreation economy to their work as land and water managers. And then in October of last year, we held an outdoor recreation caucus briefing with Senator Martin Heinrich and representatives from across the outdoor recreation industry, with hundreds of Capitol Hill staff on how people are getting outdoors during COVID-19 and the recreation outlook for winter. And those types of kind of coordinated press calls with the membership and members of Congress, you're going to see more of those from ORR. It's kind of our state of the industry moment. We have another one scheduled for March 24th that the details will be out on soon. Okay, super exciting work. This is for the ORR staff. This is some of our like sweet spot best projects to work on, but we've been really focused on supporting rural economies and their transition to recreation as a key driver for health, equitable access, and economic development across the country. And last year, the Recreation for Rural Economies program was launched through the EPA, USDA, Northern Border Regional Commission, and others. And this provides the program that communities can apply for to receive technical assistance and guidance for recreation planning and implementation in their communities. So 170 communities across the country applied for this program, and they had the capacity to accept 10. So just astounding demand for a first-year program that we're really hoping to see the capacity increased on this year, and are working with the EPA to do so. And in addition to that funding and technical assistance that they're getting through the work program, ORR fundraised and in partnership with the VF Foundation, developed kind of a small micro grant pool to additionally fund 5 communities to help them with their economic revitalization plans. I think the exciting thing about this is that these aren't your Jackson, Denver, Durango, your Salt Lakes or Moabs. They're Freiburg, Grants, New Mexico, Jasper, Alabama, John Day, Oregon, and Glenwood Springs, Colorado. So it's a cool example of kind of where recreation is going to develop across the country. And all 5 of these communities represent local stakeholders working together to build new recreation assets and new opportunities for not only to attract folks to their communities, but most importantly for those assets to be available for residents themselves to improve health and well-being of their communities. And so a big new resource alongside this work is Outdoor Recreation Roundtable's Rural Development Toolkit. And this was developed in partnership with the Oregon State University Outdoor Recreation Economy Initiative that helped us with the COVID survey earlier this year. And the Outdoor Recreation Learning Network through the NGA. But it's a resource to help rural communities build their outdoor recreation economies. And Chris Perkins he's a fellow from the Yale School of Management who's been on OR staff helping support this work through a fellowship program, really did the backbone of all of this work, and an amazing job. And he took input from over 60 stakeholders, from local mayors, state recreation directors, agency leads, and community leaders to really compile all of the best practices that make up this toolkit. So it includes links to resources and videos and outlines real steps and actions rural communities can take, whether they already have kind of a burgeoning outdoor recreation economy or they're just getting started. So it's designed to meet communities where they are and scale with them based on their education level. And so we see this tool as providing state and local officials, as well as rural community members, information that's kind of organized around the 15 best practices for developing an outdoor recreation economy. And it outlines the various challenges rural communities could face as they take steps to build their outdoor recreation economy, including limited staff, administrative bandwidth, and other funding challenges. It discusses how to tackle misconceptions about the outdoor recreation being simply about tourism, and also dealing with cultural and infrastructure changes that occur when shifting reliance from just one economic driver to multiple, and sort of the shifting identity of rural towns themselves. So this is publicly available now on our website and coincides with a list of federal funding opportunities that we're constantly updating. And we're super excited about this. It launched in January. We did a webinar that over 800 people signed up for, which just really shows the demand for these resources and how much of an opportunity there is for recreation across the country from an infrastructure and access side. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. If you'd like to find out where these resources are and how you can access them and share them and get in touch with us, our website's at the top, as well as our Twitter, and my email address is there as well if you'd like to get in touch with us. And thank you so much for all of the work that you guys do and for having me today.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Lindsay. It's an amazing recap of all the accomplishments and you know, going full steam, even right, you know, as we speak. And I was on the webinar that you did on the toolkit and whatnot, and it was really great. So we encouraged a number of communities to, you know, hopefully listen to the session today so they can just begin to figure out who do I contact, where do I start, you know, but because but I know, you know, and I really like the idea that it's, you know, it's not just the top 5 recreation communities in the nation, but it's maybe some of the really underserved, you know, understaffed areas that don't have recreation programs because they're just busy keeping the lights on and the potholes paved. So that's great. So one of the questions on LWCF, we asked about this the other day, and someone said that for communities or for people to get involved, that they would need to go through the Park Service for that. Is that who's sort of shepherding the LWCF side of the Great American Outdoors Act, or how's, like, if I wanted to get involved, how would I start that?
Yeah, and like I said, this is where the program gets really, really complicated and what everybody's trying to figure out. So forgive me as I'm not an LWCF expert, but one of the things that I'm hoping kind of comes out of ORR's work and with our state members and through the NGA, who I know is working a ton on making kind of best practices and resources available, is some sort of kind of infographic or like how to start, because I think it varies a lot state by state. I know you have to have that the statewide recreation plan in place to even be eligible to get LWCF funding. So that's something that people are really focused on and working with. So I would direct people towards their state leaders first and foremost, and then hopefully just stay in touch with us, and we will hopefully have more kind of learning resources about LWCF and how to best access the funding and use it in your community soon.
So in the toolkit, does it have a list of contacts in each state? Like in California, I wouldn't even know who to go to in California.
That's a great question. So
I don't know who the contact.
Yeah, we don't have a list of contacts, but that's a good suggestion. The toolkit itself is kind of in its um, beta test. You know, it's launched. We imagine that this is going to be a resource that we update every year, if not multiple times a year, to keep it really relevant, to keep highlighting the different community members and leaders that are making progress across the country. So yeah, having I mean, names and titles are in there. I'm sure you can track people down if you're curious on the internet, or you can get in touch with us if you have questions, and we can definitely switch forward and make introductions.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, let's see, really cool stuff. Thanks for sharing, Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay, that was terrific.
Glad to hear it.
I have a question, if I may. This is Jen Roser.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to interrupt. Okay. So thank you for that. That was really great and helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Marilee hit the sweet spot. You know, many of us as permittees or recreation service providers we all live, many of us are in small communities, and we're all involved in organizations, nonprofits with regards to recreation, events, activities, recreation economy. So this is just right what we need. I think Marilee hit the nail on the head, though. If you're in a state that doesn't have a recreation office, you don't know where to go. And I think, you know, the states that have a recreation office, that might be the first step. But so I think if ORR can sort of help us through that, boy, that would be invaluable. I don't, you all do so much, I don't know, but that would be something tremendous, as many of us in rural communities, you know, we're just all over, everybody's overcommitted. So it's like, who do you find? And then one of the things I wanted to add, the Recreation for Rural Economies program that y'all launched. And again, I just have to say that hits a sweet spot and very much appreciated. And I did attend as a business owner involved in the community and whatnot, I attended the workshop, which was really great. So I'm wondering, will that continue in terms of funding, and how would an organization or a jurisdiction, really a city or a community or a county, get involved in that? Because I'll tell you, many counties, as you well know and have pointed out, you know, we're transitioning from perhaps resource-based communities to recreation communities. And a lot of times, especially if your jurisdiction is overwhelmingly filled with public lands, there's this tremendous desire for recreation access to develop revenue and economic development, but not enough staff or people to know how to pursue it. So having a funding to help develop a roadmap, again, you've hit the spot. How do you do that?
Yeah, and you're hitting on a lot of the information that was collected to design that rural development toolkit. So your needs are resounding across the country as common needs that everybody has when looking at how to develop. And so that work, that Recreation for Rural Economies program that launched last year and funded the 10 communities with technical assistance. We're working with the EPA and the other partners to ensure that happens again, hopefully get the capacity of that program increased so that more communities can apply and receive that guidance and funding and expertise. So, I mean, those conversations have all been very promising. Everybody is really aware that this is in high demand and kind of solves a lot of unique challenges across the country when it comes to economic transition, health, access, you know, using your natural resources and topography to your community's benefit. So it's really promising. I think we're, you know, definitely going to see the continuance of that program, hopefully the expansion of that program, and on ORR side as well, you know, the public-private partnership that we've built around the grant program that coincides with that agency program. I'm working really hard to grow that capacity as well. So, and then kind of on the federal side, there's a lot of talk about rural development right now and how how that's going to get written into various legislation to support communities. So I think stay in touch is the answer, because there's going to be a lot more kind of resources and attention towards this year.
Thank you so much. Really helpful.
And then just if you want to make a couple comments about all the work that you're doing to, I mean, who was it the other day? I think maybe it was Kevin Garden with tax that goes on with the new administration.
You broke up for a little bit, but I think you were saying mention ORR's efforts with the new administration. I'm gonna go with that. I think I got a question. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
So that's what we're busy doing right now. Throughout ORR's membership, we've been coordinating our letters of support for the various nominees who are really key to our work in interior, trade, transportation, and we just, if you're not on our email list, we send out a recreation roundup every month that summarizes all this work. Anybody can sign up for it. I would highly recommend. It's where we launch resources to the public. So good thing to get once a month, and promise you won't get more emails than that. But there's been about 8 folks that we've supported, which has been a good chunk of our work. And it's really a cool effort that goes back to ORR's mission of supporting kind of the highest level, most agreed upon by the most diversity of recreation activity issues that you can think of. So it's been a cool process to be a part of, that really shows how much there is that we agree upon, whether you're a snowmobiler, an urban biker, an RVer, camper, whatever. And then there's another form that you could check out on the website, all of ORR's transition policy recommendations. We've been working to educate the administration about those, having meetings with different members of Congress. And this sort of stuff is going to be highlighted in the press call that's happening on the 24th later this month too, that we'll send out a notification around too that you can join. We may have lost Marilee. If anybody
We
has
did
any other
lose
questions.
We did lose
Okay.
Marilee. She just called me on the phone. I'm sorry. I was just
No
we're
problem.
trying to do multiple things at the same time. I think we're good. I really appreciate this. And we're all looking forward to working with you guys. It's great to have you all on point for all these other trade groups, because you really leverage, you know, our strength. Because a little group like NFRA, I mean, we sometimes struggle to get noticed, though we have our own concerns and messages, and we're very happy to be able to combine arms with a lot of other folks to get more attention to these issues. So you're doing a great job. So we
well,
really
and
appreciate
your needs are our needs, you know, like everybody needs access to the forests. And I know at the tail end of last year, with everything you guys have been through on the wildfire side, you know, we're advocating for emergency supplemental and getting, you know, the infrastructure that's been severely damaged over the last year back on its feet. So thank you for all of your efforts as well. And please just keep in touch with us on how we can continue to support the work.
Yeah, the story I tell the legislators, and it's kind of a mixed story, but I still think it's useful to say, is literally in May, when we gathered together with Forest, we had a whole meeting about the public illegally breaking in and storming into closed recreation facilities. Now, you don't really want that, and they took, so we don't want to go too far of advocating that kind of behavior, but it does show if the world is willing, is ready in mass numbers. I mean, we had a lake that had 4,000 trespassers one Sunday in the place where we opened, and the Forest Service tried to finally decided to start opening these locations, because they said we just have to. It's better to manage them than to let them, go unmanaged. They're safer managed than whatever situation is now. But we had a situation where people were breaking the law to get what we're providing, and I find that amazing. And so I really, it's an exciting time. It's trying, but it's an exciting time for all of us. So we appreciate being in partnership with you guys during that time.
Yeah.
All right.
And there's been just amazing purchase of huge outdoor,
Oh, yeah.
like with our, people, we think people buying boats and RVs, that's not an entry level purchase. Like we're expecting these folks to stick around. So I think the growth is here to stay, even as people go back to other forms of travel.
Yeah, I mean, the folks at Winnebago, the main problem with the CEO is getting beaten up by their dealers every day for not being able to produce enough product because they're selling them all off the lot. So I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break, guys, till 15 after the hour. That's the message that Marilee was passing to me over the phone. So 15 after the hour, they'll come back and pick up where we were. And I forget who's speaking at 15 after the hour. That's why I get for jumping into Marilee forced me into it. I'm sorry, but I'm going to hand back off the Master of Ceremonies title. But 15 after the hour, we'll see y'all. Thank you, everybody.
It will be
And I need. Hey, folks, we are back with Marilee. Her can on the end of the string is sort of acting up, so I've been rushed in to take over the final bits of the moderation here. So you're gonna have to put up with me one last time. We have one last presentation. You know it's true, Marilee. It's got to be what you have there. Is Jason on and unmuted anywhere? I'm looking at my participant list here.
Good afternoon or good morning. I'm on.
Yeah, great. Jason, I would, because I'm a last minute replacement, I do not know if I am supposed to be rolling your slides or if I can just throw you co-host duty and have you roll your own.
I thought you were going to roll my slides. I'd have to
Okay,
open.
I have your presentation. Let me pull it up 1 second and then I
That
will
would be
introduce
great.
you. Let me it just, when I have to do both the moderation and the presentation thing, I'm just have trouble doing two things at once. My wife tells me it's a male thing, but I don't know. It's back to the hunter-gatherers. Men can focus on one thing, like a spear point, like hunting the boar. Let's see here. Rec.gov update, range of the year, GAOA presentation, valuing your business, common.
Viper, IBPA, VIPR.
I don't know that I got it. So let me, Marilee, you're going to have to chime in. Do I have a presentation for him? I'm sorry, everybody has to wait through this. I apologize. Give me 1 second. We will pull it up. Jason.
No hurry at all. Take time. No,
You sent it to me or to Marilee or?
I sent it to Kevin. I think he had probably shared it with Marilee.
Kevin.
Yeah. Hey, Warren, I sent it to you earlier, but I just resent it. So it might be.
Okay, thank you. That'll be easier than me digging it out. I apologize. I must have missed it, not expecting it from you. I'm looking at the titles of these presentations. I got Rec.gov update, range of the year. That's not you. GAOA. That's not you. Presentation for NFRA Conference. That may be you. Do you remember what you
VIPR NFRA presentation?
Oh no,
VIPR.
I do not have it. Hold on, it's coming. I'm waiting for your thing to come up, Kevin. Sorry, everybody, that you have to watch this. Everything was here. Presentation slides. That's for Ben.
Okay, just hit my send file, so it should be coming shortly.
Okay. I'm sure it's just like a pig going through a snake. It's just huge here. There it is, Kevin. All right, VIPR, got it. And there's the presentation, looks nice. It's got pictures, better than my presentations. And we're running. There it is, awesome. Okay, so now we're back to where I should have been a few minutes ago. And I will run that and I can introduce you. So let's move forward. So anyway, so folks, we have Jason Brandt. He is branch chief for the Equipment and Services Group branch. That's within the Incident Procurement Operations Directorate of Procurement, Property, and Services Group. I assume incidents, things like fires and such, but he'll tell us. And he's had over 10 years of experience in the Forest Service, mostly in the acquisition and procurement field. It's been all over the place. Looks like he's been fire and aviation, acquisition management, Rocky Mountain Research Station. And so he has a lot of involvement with the procurement, and it's really crazy because I've seen these incidents. I mean, seriously, they have to just very quickly ramp up, and they're just have some poor guy that's just handing out procurement contracts right and left all day to try to get to keep the firefighters supplied so they can do their important job. And he's going to tell us about that because I know often these fires happen right next to the places we operate. We may have the ability to provide meals, we might have equipment we can rent, we might have all kinds of facilities. In the last case, I actually, once or twice, we've rented out campsites or provided bathroom cleaning and other trash removal services. And when they were occupying campgrounds, and it was a very confusing process for me because it's always surprising to folks, but the vast majority of us all spend our entire life providing services in partnership with the federal government, and almost none of us know anything about procurement. Everybody assumes we're like government contractors and, you know, we're bidding on defense contracts or whatever we do, and we actually don't. We're actually not really contractors in most of our lives, and the few times we run across that, I think we know as little as any person off the street. And so hopefully Jason can do some to help catch us up on that. And so Jason, if you will take over from here, and I'm going to fire up your PowerPoint on the screen.
Great, thank you, Warren. First, just a sound check, make sure everybody can hear and see me. I'm coming in clear and no issues.
You sound and look great.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Warren, thanks for also expanding a little bit on that, because the piece that I really focused on is the Viper IBPA piece. And please, when we get to the questions and answer, if you'd bring up some of those other things you mentioned, because there's some areas that I'll try to expand on as I go through the presentation, but certainly at the end, when you're talking about ad incident support, where you're doing, you know, you're renting out campgrounds or cleaning facilities or possibly catering or food, that's a little different flavor than the main information in my presentation, but I can certainly address that at the end. So I would appreciate anybody's questions or comments on that. I'm certainly not, you know, it won't be definitive, but I can certainly give you the kind of some rules of engagement, if you will, or what to look for and what to be looking for and who to connect with at those times.
Well, that's great. We meant this to be more generic. I gave my personal spin on it. That's my one iteration of this. But lots of these folks have beyond the incidents, they have services, whether it be packing or you know, meals or all kinds of things that they do for themselves, and they think, well, the Forest Service is right next to me. How might I provide products and services to the Forest Service? And so that was the generic ask of this, and that is what happens when I get right at the last minute to make the intro. I just start talking.
No, that's great. And I would also expand for those other things, because I'm very incident specific right now in my role. I've done other roles, but I can expand on some of those things too,
right.
and certainly help facilitate, at least point you in the right direction and getting you connected with the right people as those questions are being asked. So I say that just to say that my presentation's kind of focused, but I will, as I go through it, I will also try to highlight the more generic pieces for federal contracting in general, to address what to look for when you're doing things outside of incident even, and how to you know, position yourself in a way that's going to allow you to facilitate that and to you know, work with the federal government and contracting. So with that, you know, first, just thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about who we work with, our partners, our contracting. Again, I'm very specific to incident, but federal contracting is pretty standardized across the board, whether you're looking at the Forest Service, the Park Service, DOD. Just some of the things we buy are a little different. Some of the things we buy are the same, but the process is typically very standardized. So, you know, looking at the agenda, it looks like I'm not only the person keeping everybody from lunch, but I'm the person keeping everybody from the weekend. So I'll try to keep it pretty succinct and get through my slides and answer questions as well as quickly as I can. And again, Jason Brandt, I'm the branch chief for the Equipment and Services branch within the Instant Procurement Operations Group. That is a mouthful. Basically, my branch is responsible for setting up pre-season equipment agreements for incident support, primarily wildland fire support. So a lot of heavy equipment, water tenders, things of that nature. I'll have a list later on about those things. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that. I got it now.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, just quickly going over the agenda. Kind of introduction overview of the procurement, property and services, PPS, and IPO and procurement operations. We just reorged, had a reorganization in October from AQM, so I just want to cover that real quickly. Service contracting as a whole. I want to talk about the IBAs, which is Instant Blanket Purchase Agreement, and Viper and what that does for us. And then I want to give a little overview of what 2021 IBPA program is looking like, what's out, what new solicitations and rollover modifications. And then probably, you know, most important to a lot of your members is the help and assistance piece, where to go when you want to work with the federal government, who to contact. There's a lot of options out there to reach out to folks, how to work with them. And throughout this presentation, I'll have some links and stuff like that to particularly to incident procurement within the Forest Service organization. That'll have some points of contact should specific questions come up. And of course, my information's on the cover slide. So, and I already mentioned that, you know, I'll be covering generic stuff as well as I go through, but please feel free to bring those questions up at the end. So organizational overview, next slide, please.
Hey, Jason.
So procurement, property, and service.
I don't mean
Yeah.
we're getting a little bit of interference, and this may be too simple, but it seems that when you turn your head to the left, we get interference, and when it's to the right, we don't. It might be your headset, so maybe you reposition, but it seems like when your head's turned to the right, it's all good.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense because I think I'm wearing a wireless headset, and so my mic's on the right, I think. So I'll try to be not so much of a bobblehead to keep my head positioned more standard. Thanks, Kevin. And please keep me aware of that as we go through. Thanks. Appreciate that. So again, the procurement property services, we formerly, prior to last October, we were known as the Acquisition Management Group. And within procurement property and services, obviously we handle procurement property, and then the services piece is the contracting for services, which is part of procurement. So I am part of the incident procurement operations group, which is a director area under PPS. And this is organizationally, but just kind of structure us, because this will tie into some of your stuff too, Warren, is, you know, within IPO, we have 4 branches. We have incident management support, aviation contracting, equipment and services, which is my branch, and then we have logistics. At incident management is the buying teams and the procurement unit leaders there on site, you know, handing out those contracts for land use agreements for campgrounds or where we're setting up headquarters. Aviation contracting, of course, is helicopters, air tankers, those type of equipment resources. And logistics is showering and catering. And some of those also roll into ad incident management. If you get a year like last year was, particularly in California, we were pulling everything we could out to support incidents because we had so much activity going on. Next slide, please. So just a little more specific about equipment and services. We're set to coordinate the agency's pre-season needs for equipment and service contracts supporting fire and aviation management equipment and services. Primarily, we focus on the IBPA program, which is the Incident Blanket Purchase Agreement program, and we support other areas of the director as well, other areas of IPO. We try to function as one large team, so we can ramp up and down and shift as necessary. That being said, the IBPA portfolio, you know, we manage about 14,000 pieces of equipment for preseason agreements. So there's a lot of action there. Next slide, please. For the equipment services branch particularly, we have broken our management into 2 zones, east and west. And hopefully you guys recognize the map that's on the screen. It's the Forest Service regions. And so the east zone covers regions 1, 2, 4, 8, 9, while the west zone covers 3, 5, 6, and 10. I say this, the next slide is going to have points of contact. So depending on where you are and where you're looking to engage contracting, the map is going to be important on who you contact, whether it's east side, west side, and this specific equipment. And so this is just a screenshot of our webpage on the contacts. And on the top is a link to that site. And this web page has, and this is specific to incident, but this has primarily all the points of contact you'll need to reach out to if you have a question concerning, you know, incident procurement, you want to get into incident contracting. It has the contracting officers, the purchasing agents. We have the regional program reps on here, who to reach out to, and you know, email address and phone number typically. And this, we try to keep this pretty well updated. It does get behind occasionally, but it's a good source to keep in your favorites folder if you're looking to work in federal contracting to support incidents. Next slide, please. So now getting into more specifics of what is Viper and what is an IBPA. Next slide. So Viper is the virtual incident procurement system, and it's a web-based system that allows for contracting officers to create, award, and manage solicitations and agreements through an electronic procurement process. This is 100% electronic. There's no mailing documents in, anything of that nature. This is all done electronically. You sign it electronically, everything. And so it provides numerous tools for the CO, including the creation of solicitations, which get posted out publicly, amendments, collection and evaluation of offers, and electronic award, as well as modification of agreements when needed. And then it also formulates a dispatch priority list, which we'll get into here in just a minute really quickly. Next slide, please. So the IBPA, an incident blanket purchase agreement, is it's just an agreement. There's no funding tied to it. There's no guarantee of work. It's not a binding contract. It is just an agreement that basically spells out the price and conditions if you get a BPA call, which then becomes a binding contract at the time of order or dispatch. And they're established pre-season to fulfill recurring needs during the fire season. So we're not out there on the ground trying to get all these resources. We have the bulk of them, you know, already under agreement. That being said, it's an agreement. So something comes up, you have a dozer on an agreement, and you get a call saying, hey, we have a need, but you know, you're working you're rehabbing a campsite or doing something else with your dozer. It's not a binding contract on either side. So you can say, no, I'll pass. And then we just go down to the next person on the DPL. And then it becomes a binding contract once you accept that order. So basically it's an agreement on rates, location of resources. Through that process, we verify the resource. We make sure, you know, it meets the standards that we need through an evaluation process. And we typically run these for a 3-year duration. So every 4th year, we're resoliciting and awarding new agreements. And for the 3-year cycle, we do the initial award. In the next 2 years, we do what we call a rollover modification, which allows the vendor to go in and update pricing, location, can swap out equipment to some degree. And but that allows us to have a change every year, so you're not stuck with, you know, if you were to award one and have no change, so you have to keep that pricing for the full 3 years, because we understand things change. And finally, BPAs can be used by any of our wildland fire cooperators. So state and local governments can use them, other federal agencies, but it is optional for those other agencies to use them. And sometimes they have different priorities, and so they don't always use these resources, but we do make sure that they're available through the dispatch process if they're needed. Next slide, please. Each advertisement has multiple awards, excuse me, and they're tied to a dispatch center. And each dispatch center has a ranked listing of resource by type, and that's the dispatch priority listing. The ranking is determined by if there's any advantage for that piece of equipment. If there's any things that are identified as this is an advantage and to the government, and then that's ranked a little bit higher than something that doesn't have set advantage. And those are clearly articulated in the solicitations that go out. And those are the type of items that we really look to evaluation criteria and making sure that they're identified, and we know that those exist on the piece of equipment. Overall, it's based on the best value to the government. And so in a nutshell, it's lowest price technically accepted contracting. So the DPL is the dispatch priority list. So the lowest price technically accepted is number one, next one's number two, number three, and it goes down the list. And that's how, when an order comes in, that's how the dispatch community knows who to contact first. And then the closest dispatch center is the one that's used. Once the DPL is exhausted, the option to go to neighboring dispatch centers is there, and oftentimes is followed. That can depend on the emergence of the issue, of the need of the resource. So if there's a emergent need right now, something's breaking out and you need something on the ground in an hour, you may not want to go out to the next dispatch center that's 4 hours away to see what they have. Next slide, please. So here is a laundry list of the items that we procure on the Viper IBPA program. I'm not going to read through these. I think probably you guys have this list. If you have this type of equipment, please certainly be interested in getting you on the list. However, anything from buses to skidgens, water tenders, weed washing units, to vehicles with drivers. Heavy equipment's a big one. I know particularly in Region 5, that one's certainly a big one. But any questions before I go past this slide from anybody on any of these, if they had? Give it the 11 seconds and move on to the next slide. So looking at what's going on out this year, what is out this year for the 2021 solicitations, we have miscellaneous heavy equipment, which includes feller bunchers, road graders, mulchers, masticators, potable water tenders, gray water tenders, chippers, and then there's some regionally specialized equipment. Mobile sleeper units, Region 5, incident-based units, camp in the box, Region 5, chainsaw repair, Region 5, heavy equipment, Region 5. And then, and heavy equipment's on the Region 5 specialized equipment because of some issues we had with the previous solicitation being protested and having to be reevaluated. And so we're actually going out of what our 3-year cycle is. And this one will, I believe, be for 2 years to get us back into sync with the regular cycle. And most of those are out on, and I'll share a link here shortly where we post those to a public site. And the close date for those solicitations is the end of March. And they're out for usually more 30 to 45 days. We try to really set them out there for a long time so we can get as much response as possible. And so going on to the next slide, I'll just go over what the rollovers are for this year. So these are the agreements that were awarded the last 2 years that we're going into a rollover cycle, which is just a modification looking forward for the next year. And the rollovers are set to close March 15th. There are a couple, I think, that are, because of the system and some updates, are a little variation on dates, but by and large, March 15th is the deadline for those. And I put these slides up here. I realize you guys don't have agreements now, or probably most of you probably do not. But this is, if you were interested in the Viper IBPA program, this happens every year. Every year at this time of year, we're going through this cycle where we're doing the new solicitations and the rollovers. You can almost set your watch by it. So moving on to the next slide. This is the part I think is going to be most beneficial. This is the help and assistance. Again, I've tailored this towards the the Viper IBPA piece. However, I will highlight as we go through these some of the areas because a lot of them are standard for all federal contracting. So to start out, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, we also refer to those as PTACs. Those are your friends. I cannot emphasize enough how much support those can provide folks looking to get into federal contracting. Most of the time, they're staffed by previous federal contracting officers, and they know the ins and outs of the program, how to get in, who you need to talk to, you know, how to put the solicitation together, how to put a procurement response quote, request for proposal together, you know, how to decipher the SBA language if there's set asides for small businesses, all that stuff, super helpful if you're trying to get, you know, even if you're just trying to get pre-set up that you have an interest in it, making some contact with PTACs is a great resource. And I'll have some contact information here in a couple slides for the PTAC centers. I think it's the next slide actually. The second piece is the Viper Help Desk. And that's Viper specific. I'll have a slide on that as well, but that's if you're interested in the Viper IBPAs, you go through the process. The help desk is there to help assist as you walk through that process as well. And then 6-step quick start guide to federal contracting. There's only one step in there that's Viper specific. The rest of them pretty much pertain to all federal contracting. So next slide, please. So here are the PTAC contacts for each state, or most of the states in the West, and then the Southern region has a link. If you have members in regions 8 or 9. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how helpful PTACs are. They support us. It's amazing how much support they provide folks looking to get into federal contracting. They're a really great resource. So I strongly encourage you to utilize them if you have an interest in getting into federal contracting. Next slide. So this is the help desk, the link to the help desk, the phone number. Again, this is very Viper specific for the IBPAs. But if you decide to go down that route, you'll see this on the Viper website as you're getting set up to be a Viper contractor as well, these links, but just to share it with the group, I'll throw this up there. And then the next slide is starting the 6-step quick start guide, if you will. So again, there's only one step that is specific to Viper. The rest of them, in order to be a federal contractor, you need to do first is obtain an email address, because you have to get a DUNS and a SAM account, and you'll need that. So the Viper piece is the e-authentication, and that's primarily so that we can do everything electronically. That allows everybody to sign the agreement electronically. And other than that, you know, that piece alone is Viper specific. Step 2, obtain a DUNS number. Many of you may already have that. And then step 3 is the IRS business number. Next slide. Step 4 is to register with SAM in the database and certify small business status. If that's the case, and what small business status you are, there's multiple levels of different small business status, and this is an area that the PTACs can really assist you with. And so no matter what type of federal contracting you're doing, when you're responding to a request for quote, request for proposal, one of the things that has to be done before the award can be made is you have to certify that you're active in SAM and your account's not expired. So that is a critical piece. Step 5 is the Viper specific piece of obtain a level 2 e-authentication account. And again, that's so that we can manage those procurements completely electronically, and everybody can sign electronically within that system. I say completely electronically, and maybe I need to expand on that a little bit, because we get a lot of proposals in, or I shouldn't say we, because I'm so used to the Viper system now. In regular contracting, a lot of proposals can come in electronically, and you can sign them electronically through your regular, electronic signature route. E-authentication is actually a program you have to sign into that allows you to sign electronically within the Viper IBPA system. So it's not that we don't take email proposals, but for the Viper, it's all done within that system. Hopefully that did not generate more questions. If it did, when we get to the end, please, I'll try to articulate that a little better. And then finally is to locate the advertisement on beta.sam. And this is beta.sam is where everything gets advertised for federal procurements. So once you create a SAM account and get a DUNS number, you can go to beta.sam and you can set that up so that it watches for, you identify what NAICS code, North American Industry Classification Code, you're operating under, or what NAICS codes if they're multiple. And you can set up search functions so it lets you know whenever a solicitation post to beta.sam that may be of interest to you, and you'll get an email saying, hey, this just posted, it's open for 2 weeks or 30 days. It'll give you the information, you can go there, and that's where you would typically see the request for quotes, request for proposals, those other items that you would want to respond to. The one exception is there are some thresholds, and I believe it's still $25,000 don't have to be posted there. So any procurement that's going to be awarded that is not anticipated to exceed $25,000, you don't have to post to that public site. Many times, often folks still do, but there are some other avenues. But anything over that threshold needs to be posted there, even if it is, a sole source type award where you're awarding to one vendor and you didn't advertise it. You still have to post when your intent to award to only one person and not compete it, or you have to post the award itself to beta.sam. And that is purely to the goal of federal contracting is to have competition and to increase that however best we can. And so anytime you limit competition, they really want you to post that and make sure others know that, because typically when you're doing that, you're saying that there's only one vendor in the world that can do this. And by posting it publicly, the intent is maybe somebody else out there will say, hey, wait, I could have done this too. Can you keep me in the loop on this? And then getting close to the end here, the next link or next slide is, I think we skipped one, didn't we? Oh. Is there one slide after that? Oh, never mind. I think one I have is hidden. I will send this slide to you. This is just some links for resources. I will send an email to Kevin with just a copy of the links, because I think it's hidden in there. Actually, you should have it in the package, Warren, if you can go back and, yeah, that's the one. Thank you. I apologize. So this is specific information, Viper overview, resources, general information. Most of these are specific to IBPA program. The COVID-19 link, I included that because that's where we update items specific to that and how we're doing business relative to COVID-19, and what's expected of the government, what's expected of the contractor, that type of information. And then the other information is just more general information. So these are some good links. And of course, any questions that come from these, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to direct traffic or get you in touch with the right person if it's not. I say that because I think I'm very specific to incident, and you guys may have some more general contracting questions, and I can certainly connect you with the right folks to make those happen or to get additional information on specific items. And so with that, the last slide is just questions from any of you. If I went over things too fast, need me to go back, I'm happy to touch on some things. Will I see the questions pop up, or is somebody?
Hey, Jason, I'll go ahead and start if no one else wants to get going here. And I think just to keep in mind, I don't think you can underestimate how little we all know about this. So to keep things simple, I think you gave us all the information we needed, but to try to organize it. Say I'm sitting here.
No questions yet. I will, Warren, to touch on some of the things you brought up.
Can you not hear Kevin?
You know, when there's an incident going on, we also we'll have folks on the ground. We usually send out a buying team, which is comprised of instant procurement, our warranted and non-warranted purchase card holders, and they'll do a lot of the procurements locally. That being said, you know, the warrants for the land use agreements, like you're talking about for campgrounds, and then for some services at incident, which would fall under EERAs, and we also use commercial services if that's something that you do in your regular day job, to where you say, no, we're usually set up to clean facilities. This is our rates. We have a daily rate of this, this, and this. A lot of times that warranted person can sign you up to support that incident, and you can work directly with them. For some of the other stuff I saw on a note with the Great American Outdoors Act, I know that stuff is still being worked through. I would work with your local Forest Service representation, what we refer to as the program people, the people who are getting these great ideas set up and trying to implement them. And we're just trying to make sure that they get the right things in place, because they'll be able to tell you if there's opportunities coming along and work with you on what those are. And identify if there's a contracting officer you need to reach out to identify how to best engage with that piece, if it'll be advertised on beta.sam or not. But that's done locally. So yeah, hopefully that explains a little bit more for you guys. But the ad incident stuff is truly, if you're there and you can provide something, you know, don't be shy reaching out to some of the locals that you may know and saying, hey, we have these resources. Is this something you can use? And they'll put you in touch with the buying team or the incident management team. And then through that process, it works a lot better if you have a SAM account and a DUNS number, because then you have the business ID information, and it makes it it's much cleaner, and it works better for you because then you get a payment a lot quicker because you're already in the system. So when they submit for that, you submit an invoice, all your information's already there to receive that payment.
Yeah, are you hearing us, Jason?
Oh, you're on mute, Warren, I think.
No, you're I don't know how to get a message to him.
Yeah. Good point.
Oh, I'm not hearing anything.
Right, that's
right.
Yeah. For some reason, volume. System volume. I need like a pad. I can write in mirror style and hold it up to the.
All right, I got the voice back. Did you hear anything I said?
We heard everything you said. You just couldn't hear us. So Kevin had a couple comments for you.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't even know that must have happened when I was trying to adjust.
Don't worry about it. This whole Zoom thing throws everybody. Kevin, go ahead. Go back to what you were asking before.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Jason, can you hear me?
Yep, good to go. Sorry.
Okay, right. So I just wanted to share with you, that was great. That was a lot of information. I'm glad we're going to have your slides, because we're going to have to go back through that, because I don't think you, being so intimately aware of this, can underestimate how little we know about it. So to kind of help people digest what you just said, and really, I think for a lot of folks, it's just a simple matter of, would this even work for me? Does it apply to me? Can I can I take advantage of it? So let me ask you this question. Say I'm sitting out there in Region 5. I'm near a national forest or in a national forest. I've got some heavy equipment. And I'm thinking, hey, I might, the government might be interested in this. If I understood you correctly, is the first step, probably the easiest step, is just to call the local PTAC person and basically give them that information and say, I'm interested in entering, seeing if there's any opportunities out there. This is who I am. This is where I'm located. This is what I've got. Does it make sense for me to go through this effort of signing up for this system? Is this the kind of thing that the government might want to buy from me? Does that sound like the right approach, or is there a better approach?
I would say specifically for our agency, that's a great approach. I would also reach out locally and find out from if you have Forest Service contacts locally, if that's something that's needed. Because the other, like I mentioned, for our procurements, they're on a 3-year cycle. But if you miss that cycle, you can often get on a local list. That's like when we tap all those resources out, we also keep this kind of secondary list of people in that area if there's a really emergent need that they can be reached. So you'd still want to go through the SAMs and the DUNs, and the PTAC's a great resource, but working with the locals, identifying that there is a need, and say, like it is a piece of heavy equipment, a dozer. It's like, yeah, I know this, you talk to locals and say, well, you won't be able to respond to a solicitation for 2 years, but we'll take your name and information down, and then reach out. I sent the contact list for some of the CEOs and purchasing agents and program folks, and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in this, and they'll tell you like, oh yeah, that'll be re-advertised in 2022 around this time. Watch out for, or watch that beta.sam site, because it'll be advertised there. General procurement, I caution the PTAC thing only because they won't know specifically to Forest Service incident. They're going to tell you watch beta.sam. They can help you get signed up so you can make sure all your ducks are in a row when you go to respond to a solicitation, but they don't know what's coming out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So let's say and you talked about those contracts under 25,000 that may not get publicly noticed.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to catch a few of those. If I go to my local forest office, or even my forest supervisor's office, who do I ask for? Who's the person that's going to be handling this?
It depends on if you're looking at something to do with campgrounds, I would talk to recreation. If you're looking something to do with roads, maybe engineering. You want to talk to the program who's going to be responsible for the piece that you want to get engaged with, because they're going to say, yeah, we have these 3 projects coming up next summer. This is the CO we're going to work with, and then they can connect you to the CO, and they can say, yeah, no, this is, it's $10,000. We're going to send it out to, we know, 6 vendors, and we're going to get prices from them. We're not going to publicly advertise it. And then you can be one of those people like, hey, I'm interested. I really want to participate. And I'm sure you guys are well aware, just that connection with the forest office or the district office is so crucial to find out what's going on, and kind of getting a heads up in that relationship building piece, because they'll be able to connect you with the CO.
Okay, great, thanks. So Jen Roser asked a question. Let me ask it. I'll ask it for you. I'll read it here. Jen asks, would this procurement system only apply to Forest Service contracts, and would other federal agencies have similar procurement systems?
So the Viper system is only only Forest Service. Department of Interior has awarded some Viper agreements before, but typically we don't want to do, like, we wouldn't want DOI to set something similar up, because we wouldn't want to be in direct competition of each other. So they can utilize our system, and that's the way it's kind of structured, is that if they want to use that, they can certainly reach in there through the dispatch process and pull out the resources on our DPL. So there is not another system like that. There are some state, I don't even know if they're not as expanded as Viper, but there are some state contracting lists, and I want to say systems, but I don't know if I'd go that far, that are separate than Viper IBPAs, but those are managed by the individual state. So they're not federal.
Thanks.
Good. Anybody else? Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That was fabulous. So Marilee's nodding her head. Marilee's, you can't hear and Marilee's mute. So between the two of you, you'll have a great time communicating.
Well, yeah. As long as I wasn't muted going through the whole thing. So yeah, no, I appreciate the reaching out. And if you have any questions, my contact information's on there. You know, shoot me an email, ask. You know, or if you have a questions, you go through the website. The website's going to be a little clunky, I think, for the next couple of weeks because we're actually going through a new contract for that. So once we get that back up and running, it'll be, we'll keep it really up to date. That's our goal. But things do change. It's a very dynamic environment. And so, but yeah, happy to field any questions if you have them. You guys have my contact information.
Good. Well, we're going to make your presentation available to everybody, and they'll have the links and stuff and the contact information at the end. So that's fabulous. Good.
Great. Thank you.
So I guess it's back to anybody. I guess we're done. So I never know what to do at the end here. Marilee, do you have any final things we need to have? You can do hand signals or something, and I'll try to say. Anybody can read hand sign language?
Can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Might be handy on the Zoom.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I just thank everybody for coming. I think this wraps it up.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. It was, I mean, it was really, I know Marilee was nervous about this whole thing, but it was, I miss, you know, having hors d'oeuvres and margaritas with everybody, you know, afterwards. But other than that and the personal interaction, I thought this went great. And the good news is we've solved for years and years, we've wanted to record our conferences, and now we solved it basically for free. It's just part of the technology. And we'll get all this stuff posted with the videos and such and do some follow-ups. I know we're going to do some follow-ups with the GT stuff because I'm going to make sure we do that. We're going to try to see if in general, if you know, Georgia's group up there, the recreation group, we'll try to get them to continue the sort of listening and discussion sessions that Michiko started. I thought that was a great thing, and we're going to keep trying to do that. And I had a note from somebody in the Inyo today, which I thought was very, had seen the fire thing and said, well, geez, guys, you know, it doesn't sound like this is going to be solved in 6 months. You know, what are y'all doing after that? And I said, well, you got it backwards, man. We've been saying that for years. It's you guys in the Forest Service. We need to understand that, but it's great. So we're going to have, you know, we're not done at all on the fire thing. The 6 months thing is a nice start, but it was an accommodation to get moving. So we, as a group, we have worked in the fire. And so if any of those things, whether it be COVID, Cal OSHA, the fire, if you're having a specific problem, let us know, because one, we want to help you, and two, it's probably coming, the same problem's probably coming at us soon too. And so it's good to have that heads up and have us work it as a group. Otherwise, everybody have a great weekend. This is fabulous. We'll post all this stuff and have a great season.